Please welcome Tim Harford in conversation with David Bryant.
David, do we tell them which one's which? I'm Tim. He's David.
That's Tim. Now, Tim and I had the chance to chat a little bit prior to our going on stage, thank goodness. And I just wanted to tell everybody that, first of all, thank you for being part of our Writers' Festival. Many of you, year after year, thank you for buying what is a relatively expensive reader ticket and a very expensive pair of angel tickets. We appreciate that enormously, and that is the fuel that really keeps this very intellectual, 3-day wonder of seminars, classes, lectures, etc. going. So we thank you very much for that. Tim and I were chatting earlier, and he has given me license to begin with an absolutely ridiculous but somehow connected tale of Messy, which is that when Steve Allen was doing his Westinghouse syndicated show on 11 o'clock at night, I saw it WPIX in New York, somebody gave Steve a rusted wreck of a Civil War cannon and dragged it on stage. And Steve Allen said, well, I don't want it, so let's have a contest. And the contest consisted of sending 3x5 cards to Steve Allen, Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood, and Steve would then look at the cards because the cards would make a pitch from strangers across America to get the cannon. The winning card, when he finally announced the winning card, he held it up. It had been burned on the edges, smudged with coffee, motor oil, and he'd driven his car over it, wrinkled it, flattened it out, and then ironed it and sent it, a guy in Ohio. And it said, Dear Steve, I want the cannon because I am so careful with everything in my life. And I thought that was absolutely perfect way to start Messy. So Tim and I agreed on sort of a way to get this rolling, and that is with Keith Jarrett.
Yes. So the book begins on the stage of the Cologne Opera House, which is a huge venue in Germany, 1,400 seats. And we're with Vera Brandes. And Vera Brandes walks out on the stage and looks out at this huge empty auditorium. So who is Vera Brandes, you're asking? Vera Brandes is the youngest concert promoter in Germany. She's a 17-year-old kid. She loves jazz. At the age of 16, she says, right, there's no jazz in Cologne, I'm going to start organizing jazz concerts. And this is only the 5th concert she has promoted. And she somehow has managed to persuade this august venue to host this late-night concert of jazz. After all the opera singers have gone away, 11:30 at night, everyone's going to come in, and Keith Jarrett will play. And Keith Jarrett's a young musician. He's got a reputation. He's played with Miles Davis, but he's a young musician, and he's got this new way of playing, which is he's going to sit down at the piano and just play whatever comes into his head. And people are really loving this, but this is the biggest concert Keith Jarrett's ever done by himself. And it's a sellout. Everyone is going to come to this concert. So this is the situation Vera finds herself in. She's going on stage before the opera, and after the opera there's going to be this improvised concert, and she wants to introduce Keith Jarrett to the piano. So Keith Jarrett comes out, and he immediately looks at this thing with suspicion. He plays a few chords, shakes his head, beckons over his producer, Manfred Eicher. Manfred Eicher plays a few chords, he shakes his head, the two of them are muttering. Vera Brandes doesn't know what's going on, doesn't seem good. She doesn't know what's going on. And then Manfred Eicher comes over to Vera, she's 17 years old, and says, you got to get a new piano, otherwise Keith can't play. Because there'd been a mix-up. What you need to understand about Keith Jarrett is he's a really tidy-minded guy, okay? He likes things perfect. Sure, he's an improviser, he's a creative person, but he wants things perfect. If you go to a Keith Jarrett concert, you'll be offered cough suites to make sure that you don't cough and interrupt the music. And he's specified he wants a particular kind of piano. He's heard Bösendorfer Imperial. He's heard a jazz concert in Cologne with a Bösendorfer Imperial. He wants that piano on stage. But of course, the opera house crew, they're more interested in opera, and so there's some mix-up, and they find a Bosendorfer piano, and they bring it on stage, but it's not an Imperial. In fact, it's not even a proper piano. It's a rehearsal model. The keys are sticking, the pedals don't work, the felt is worn away in the upper register. It's not a full-sized concert piano. It's not loud enough. It will not be audible at the back of the auditorium. Yeah? It is literally unplayable. And understandably, Keith Jarrett doesn't want to play it. So he says, you've got to get a new piano, and he walks out. Okay, but the problem is, it's 1975, Friday afternoon in Germany, everyone's gone home. No one's bringing a new piano to study. There is no way. And she tries. She's a smart kid. She tries. She can't do it. So she then has only one option. She goes out. She finds Keith Jarrett in his car. It's raining. She knocks on the window. And he winds down the window. It's the 70s. He winds down the window. and she gets down so she can make eye contact with him, eye level. And she begs him. She begs him to play. She's just a kid. There's 1,400 people coming. There's going to be a riot if he doesn't play. And Keith Jarrett looks at this rain-drenched girl, and he feels sorry for her. He says, never forget, only for you. So they get a piano tuner. They try and fix some of the problems. There's a lot of problems they cannot fix. But Keith is going to have to make the best of it. And so later that evening, in front of this packed auditorium, the largest crowd he has ever faced, he walks out on stage, he sits down at this piano that he knows is unplayable, and he begins. And it becomes very clear very quickly that something magical is happening on stage. So Jarrett's avoiding the upper register because it doesn't sound good. He's in the middle of the keyboard. That gives everything this very soothing, ambient quality. But that will just send everyone to sleep. Also, because the piano's so quiet, he's having to really hit it. So he's playing these very peaceful notes very hard. The other thing he does is he sets up these vamping, repetitive riffs in the bass, because there's some resonance there that people might be able to hear, even at these high balconies at the back of this room. And so this tension between very soothing notes that he's playing and the aggression with which he's playing them creates this magical effect. It's an amazing effect. And the audience love it. Absolutely love it. And audiences continue to love it because, as you just heard, it was recorded. The reason it was recorded is because Keith Jarrett and Manfred Eicher said, well, we've got recording engineers, we might as well press play on the tape recorder so that we have documentary evidence of what a musical catastrophe sounds like. They didn't get a musical catastrophe, they got a masterpiece. It's Keith Jarrett's most popular album. It's not just Keith Jarrett's most popular album, it is the best-selling piano album in history. I have 3 children. My wife listens to the Colne concert album during labor with two of our children. She now has mixed feelings about the music. I still like it. And that's how I begin the book, because I wanted to explore this idea that sometimes when things do not go the way we want them to go, they do not go the way we plan them to go, we are convinced that things are going to go badly, miracles happen. And that disruption, that frustration creates amazing things. And that's what the book is in part about.
And there can be great prosperity in the creative process from things that are messy. And I'd love to read for our audience just a moment. This sentence really captivated me. But often we are so seduced by the blandishments of tidiness that we fail to appreciate the virtues of the messy, the untidy, unquantifiable, uncoordinated, improvised, imperfect, incoherent, crude, cluttered, random, ambiguous, vague, difficult, diverse, and even dirty.
Yes.
And that's what may drive and can drive. You give countless examples of the scientific method being at times either accidentally or intentionally, because a great mind can say, bring in the chaos, bombard me with so many different ideas.
Yeah.
And then the sorting process is a lot of what this book is about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about a lot of different things. It's kind of a messy book, but I don't feel I should apologize.
I spilled
for
coffee
that.
on
Yeah,
it this
no,
morning
it's-
intentionally.
yeah. I mean, there's stuff in the book about does it really help if you try to organize your email in folders? It doesn't help. Happy to discuss that. But yeah, a lot of it is about this creative process. And one of the things that struck me, so in the middle of writing this book, I stopped writing this book and I wrote another book called The Undercover Economist Strikes Back, which is not
Huge book.
which sadly is not on sale today. At least I haven't signed any copies, but you can look it up. Undercover Economist Strikes Back. It's a nice book. I'm proud of it. And then I went back to this book, and I thought that's probably not the way you should do it. But one of the things I then realized as I was researching the book is that's how everybody does it. Everyone you've ever heard of, everyone you ever respected, does what this pattern of what I call slow motion multitasking. So they have these different projects on the go, and it just seems to be pretty fundamental to the process, both of highly creative artists and of highly creative scientists.
And this may be our opening for Charles Darwin.
You want to talk about Charles Darwin?
I think you will lead that discussion.
So Charles Darwin. Okay, I'm an economist. I'm not a biologist, but Charles Darwin is just an extraordinary creative process. So he starts off. He's interested in zoology and botany, and plants and animals at first. And then he goes on this famous voyage around the world, the voyage of the Beagle, exploring all these different places and seeing all these different things and musing about them with no particular goal in mind. He has absolutely no idea what he's just going to see the world. One of the things he does on the voyage of the Beagle is he examines coral reefs, and he comes up with this theory of how coral reefs are formed, which is basically correct. But that's interesting because it plants a seed of, this is a very slow process of change. It's not evolution, but it plants a seed for the theory of evolution. And after he gets back, he makes some notes on the origin of species in a notebook, but then he gets distracted. He gets distracted because his son's born. Then he starts writing a book about the development of a human infant. But then he gets super into earthworms and writes a book about earthworms. Then he starts getting interested in taxonomy. He's still interested in species, but what is a species? Like, how do you decide one species for another? He realizes he doesn't know enough about taxonomy. And then he goes on this weird journey where he becomes the world's leading expert on barnacles and publishes like a 4-volume book on barnacles. Then he gets back. He's still writing about all kinds of stuff. He finally, about 30 years after this eureka moment where he was inspired, by the way, by an economist. We're the top guys, economists. Thomas Malthus, 30 years after this original eureka moment where he kind of sees the germ of the origin of species, he publishes The Origin of Species. Then he goes back and starts thinking about various kinds of slime mold. 44 years after he first makes notes on the development of the human infant, in time for his son's 45th birthday, he publishes the book on basically that was inspired by watching his son learn to talk, learn to walk. I mean, it's this astonishing mix of all of these different ideas constantly going around and around. And you could say, well, just imagine what he could have achieved if he was able to concentrate, but I don't know. And he's not the only one. He's not the only one. Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park, same thing, lots and lots of different interests. Einstein published 4 different papers in his, this is 115 years ago now, his miraculous year, 4 different papers, each worthy of a Nobel Prize in physics, totally different topics, 4 in 1 year on 4 different topics. And then while he was working on general relativity, he kind of got distracted and a bit depressed, and he'd done all the heavy lifting, but he couldn't quite make it work. And so he ended up working on something else, which turned out to be the theoretical foundation of laser beams. And then he goes back to the general relativity, realizes what it implies, finishes it off. I mean, if you can goof off, and goofing off is laser beams, it's all right. But we can all do it. We can all do this slow motion multitasking. It's partly a recognition of how the creative process works. And part of the challenge is to do it without losing your mind. It's not so easy.
Well, maybe that opens us up for Twyla Tharp as a methodology.
Yeah. Twyla Tharp, I should say, is not just a methodology. She is a brilliant choreographer. But I was fascinated by her approach. So she's very much in sympathy with this. There's lots of different ideas. You've got to constantly be thinking about different ideas, have lots of projects on the go. The trouble is when you've got lots of projects on the go, your mind is constantly thinking about all the projects. It's quite stressful. You start getting anxious that you're going to lose good ideas. She says this is the paranoia of any creative person, that you're going to have a good idea and then you'll lose it. You'll forget it. And Twyla's approach to this is so simple. She just says, well, I got a box for each project. Great big cardboard box, and I write the name of the project on, and then anything that comes up, a magazine article, like a DVD, a theatre program, print out from a web page, just throw it in the box. And you can come back to the box 5 years later, 10 years later, and just do archaeology through the box and see what you were thinking. Yes, it's an organizational system, but it's a very simple organizational system, because one of the messages of the book is some things are fundamentally messy, and if you try to get them too organized, it'll never work, and you're just in for frustration. Can we talk about premature filing?
We can.
Okay.
Just this once,
So-
though. Don't.
So as part of working on the book, this is where we get to kind of like your email and your desks, and away from Einstein and Darwin and Keith Jarrett, because this is not just a book about super creative people. This is a book for everyone. So premature filing, I interviewed a gentleman called Steve Whitaker, who's a psychologist who's worked for places like IBM and Microsoft and Lotus, big software companies, and is also an academic and studies how people file their photos and file their email and just their digital stuff, their physical stuff. And he has very interesting things to say on messy desks, if you want to talk about it at some stage. But he's discovered that there's no point in filing your email, because if you search for it, you are likely to find it quicker than if you go through all of these folders. It depends what the structure of the information is. If you're, say, an accountant and we've got different clients, we've got different filing deadlines, sure, you can have folders and everything can be neat. But for many people, for many projects, there is no neat. You don't know what category this falls into. And so Whitaker has identified this thing he calls premature filing. And premature filing is something comes into your inbox or onto your desk, and you look at it and you go, I don't really know what this is. It's a letter from the boss, or it's an interesting project, it's an article I find intriguing, but I don't really know where it belongs. This may be very important in my future life, or it may be trash in 3 weeks. I don't know. Tidy-minded people go, better get it off my desk, better get it out of my inbox. It needs to go in a folder. And so they create a folder, physical folder, digital folder, they file it away. And Whitaker says the problem is you don't really know what it is or where it belongs. And so this leads to what he calls a failed filing attempt. And a failed file is, it's got one thing in it. And you don't know what it is and you don't know how to find it. Whereas if you just leave it there in your inbox, or maybe in like an action folder, I have an action folder, or you leave it on your desk. I've got an in tray, just leave it in the in tray for a bit. And then after a month, it starts to become super clear what this thing is, and then you can delete it or file it. And it's kind of annoying that you have a pile of paper on your desk and you've got these emails and you haven't quite dealt with them. But it does help. And he's actually studied differences in behavior between what he calls the filers and the pilers. He says the filers, he studied an office move, and the filers were in big trouble because they had huge archives. They didn't know what was in them. They had duplicates of everything. It was superficially organized, but actually completely inaccessible, whereas the pilers had small archives. They knew where everything was, and they had no problem. So the messy people were actually better organized. Of course, you can be pathological. You can have piles of trash on your desk, and it can be completely counterproductive. But sometimes something that superficially looks messy is, in fact, better organized than you might think.
We, in a previous life, I was director of the New Canaan Library in Connecticut, and Richard Salant had lived, not a household name, but Richard Salant was president of CBS News, and 60 Minutes as a result of that and many other things, put that CBS brand on on news, and I became friendly with his widow, and we went through his files one day, and they were massively disorganized.
Yeah.
And great fun to go through, and mostly on onion skins, so it felt like a trip through the history of paper.
Yeah.
And some of them were so good that Dick Salant had 5 and 6 copies of them.
Right.
For instance, a letter from a farmer in Iowa who said, "I don't understand why your network will not support the war in Vietnam." And then kind of hinted that he didn't either, the farmer, but felt patriotically that he should.
Yeah.
And that letter was haunting because it was on Dick Salant's desk in a file that we found
So
randomly, then something called letters, which I didn't, the heading truly was letters I never responded to. Yeah. Which I thought was an interesting folder.
Yeah.
But it's impossible. Well, you're describing it. It's
Yeah.
impossible for some of us to get organized because the avalanche of information. That's why libraries are so terrific.
Yeah.
I mean, if you come in here with even scattered thinking, you can focus it and get directed. But then you'll get scattered again.
Yeah, the power of serendipity. It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
But I mean, just on this, I love this idea of all of these papers and I'm going to be talking about paper, by the way, at 11:30, because I'm talking about the innovations that shape the modern world, and paper is my number one. Don't tell anybody. Secret, just between us. Paper is like the number one. It's amazing, important invention. So you're speaking my language. But so come along. We're in the big room, so I'm going to need some support. So a pile of paper on the desk. These are among the things I did not expect to discover while I was working on the book. So a pile of paper on the desk, you would think it's disorganized. Okay, it's random. It's just a pile of stuff. And then Steve Whitaker again pointed out to me that actually the way a pile of paper is organized is it's the stuff that you've touched most recently is on the top, and the stuff that you haven't touched for a long time is on the bottom. Which doesn't sound like a very sophisticated way of organizing, but it is a way of organizing. Turns out to have a lot of subtlety in it. So my father worked in computer science his whole life, right? His whole working life. He's still alive. Now he does model railways. He's not so interested in computer science. But one thing I learned from him is a super important problem in computer science is what information do you store in the fast memory cache of a computer? So you've got the slow stuff, and you've got the fast stuff. And these days, it's caches all the way down. You've got lots and lots of different caches, but the same basic problem applies. You can't afford everything to be super fast. So like, what do you keep just at your fingertips that you can touch and you can use immediately? Well, the answer is, well, whatever you're going to use next. But you don't know what you're going to use next. So you have to make a prediction of what you're going to use next. It turns out that in many cases, the best prediction of what you are going to use next is what you used most recently. The longer ago you touched it, the longer it is likely to be before you need to touch it again. So there's a theorem in computer science about this. And that is why all the computers we use, the smartphones, everything, all this digital technology all around us, the way data is stored in their caches is exactly like a pile of paper on your desk with the stuff you haven't touched at the bottom and the stuff you have touched at the top. I never realized that just having a messy desk is basically accessing a deep theorem in computer science, but it's true. And then when you reflect on it, again, you can get to a pathological level. Of course, you could be too messy, you can be too tidy, but if you reflect on it, when you pick up a pile of paper that's been sitting on your desk for a while, there is a structure to it. And you look at the bottom half and it's like, oh, we don't need this, oh, glad I kept that, put it to one side. Everything else goes in the recycling bin. There's a structure. Even though we don't understand the way we interact with this stuff, it's giving it structure.
It would be fun to flip that pile if we could magically also flip them individually.
Yeah.
And flip that pile as a little stunt for something.
Yeah, and you could you can really mess with people's minds.
Yes, you could really.
I mean, there is a Japanese gentleman. He's an economist, and I'm afraid I forget his name, but he's got this filing system that there are like filing system nerds, and I'm a nerd, so I'm not criticizing anybody for being a filing system nerd. And one of these ideas that's caught on is this guy's filing system, which is every single document goes in a folder, and on the spine of the folder, you write what the document is, and then you have them all lined up on a shelf. And whenever you take a document out, you put it back this end of the shelf. And so everything on the shelf organizes itself according to how recently you accessed it. And everyone thinks this is genius. I'm like, well, just take them off the shelf, put them on your desk. It's not very different. It looks neater, not very different.
It's interesting, too, to ask, and certainly a group like this, what are you reading now? And I think that everybody here, I'm guessing, has a stack about that high, at least, on their nightstand.
Yes.
And another tucked away in an office.
Yep.
And maybe some more someplace else, because all of these books have grabbed you.
Yes.
And then you say, oh.
Yeah, drowning in books. And
yes.
people say, because I'm a journalist, people send me books as well. And so it's like email. You know, email is like a to-do list that other people get to write for you. Do not like that. I've got the same thing. I've got a bookshelf which is full of books I have to read because somebody else thought I should read them. And I realize it's a great privilege that people send you books. But at the same time, I've always got a list of books I want to read that I'm hoping someone will send me a free copy of. It's never the ones I want to read.
No.
What have I been reading recently? So I recently read Bill Bryson's book, The Body, as just a wonderful general interest book. Thank you so much for Bill Bryson. He came from America, settled in England. He's so funny. Wonderful book about the body. So engaging, makes it seem so easy. But another book I've been reading is Janelle Shane's You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, which is a book about artificial intelligence. And you Look Like a Thing and I Love You is a chat-up line that her computer developed, having looked at lots and lots of chat-up lines, and it's like, okay, right, artificial intelligence, produce the perfect chat-up line. It was, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. But it's a very funny book, but it teaches you a lot about how AI works. But a lot of what I read is an input into the next book. So I'm currently working on another book about technology, and I'm working on a book about how we think about statistical and factual claims in the world around us. How do we make things make sense? And that's partly a technical matter. Correlation is not causation. But so much of it is psychological. Am I in a bubble? Am I just reading people who agree with me? Am I dismissing information I don't want to encounter? There's so many interesting books about that topic, but I've found that people rarely put the two sides together, the mathematical and the psychological. That's what I'm trying to do. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
This festival began Tuesday night for the Angels with a discussion between Carl Hiaasen and James Patterson.
I was there and I loved it, even though I was unbelievable. It was 4 o'clock in the morning in my head. And I was thinking, it
doesn't matter.
It was like those nights that you have when you're a few cocktails in and the and you want to go to bed, but the conversation is just so good. It was like that.
But James Patterson told the group that he's so highly organized that I can't believe he's writing fiction. He sounds as if he should be writing about artificial intelligence with the structure he gives each of his books, which is up to 50 or 60 pages of an outline.
So he's drafting and drafting. Yeah.
Do you use an outline?
Yeah, I was
well, for nonfiction, I would think you'd need some structure.
Yeah. You sound like my editor.
He's good. So
could you have a word with Harford about the structure? So, yes, but the structure changes. So, the first draft of Messy began with a story about Benjamin Franklin, and which I think is really interesting. So, Benjamin Franklin, you may have heard of him. And he's an interesting gentleman. One of the things he did in his autobiography is he reflected on something he called his virtue journal. In the virtue journal, there were certain things he wanted to be. He wanted to be humble like Jesus, he said, which I think is not a particularly humble thing to say, but okay, fine. He wanted to fornicate less and drink less, and he wanted to just become a more virtuous gentleman in all kinds of ways. And he makes a list of 13 virtues. And his plan is each week he's going to focus on a different virtue, and then that gets you through a quarter, basically. And then the next quarter, you're going to go back and you'll focus on the 13 virtues, one a week, and you just keep doing it, reflecting, did I live up to my aspirations? Did I improve myself? It's very, very interesting. And this is self-help in the 1700s. It's really interesting. In his autobiographies, this is a great man at the end of his life, reflecting on his life. He says, I think this worked very well for me, but there was one virtue I was never able to master. orderliness. Keep a tidy desk. Keep a tidy diary. Keep a tidy bookshelf. I could never do it. And the idea of this Benjamin Franklin, 75 years old, going, just think about what I could have done, only I managed to... It's weird. People, so many successful people I met while talking about the book, publicizing the book, have told me, I feel so much better about my desk now. Why do you need me to tell you to feel better about your desk? You're like a network TV anchor, you have a PhD, you're a millionaire, you're a super successful person, published author. Why do you need me to reassure you that it's fine that you've got paper on your desk? Benjamin Franklin was the same. Anyway, what I was going to say was the book started with the story about Benjamin Franklin, and I was absolutely convinced this is the perfect way to start the book. And my editor says, I know, I'm not feeling it. I'm not that interested in Benjamin Franklin. And it turned out to all be about Keith Jarrett in the end. So you can structure, but you're going to have to be willing to adapt the structure. And I think the difference between James Patterson, other than that he's enormously more talented and successful than I am, is that he's driving a plot, whereas I'm making an argument. And the argument can be put together in different ways. You can change the order in a way that not so straightforward to change the order of a plot. So I think it is fiction and non-fiction are a little different.
Oh, quite.
But to be honest, if Patterson is doing it and I'm not, just do what he's doing because I'm doing it wrong. Let's face it.
You're doing it just fine. Now, the term you use in your book, which I just love, is alertness.
Yeah.
That is being, and I suspect that this group had pretty good SAT scores, and I think the IQs in here are not too shabby. So I think we have an audience of people who are very alert. But there are people that go through, I remember as early as the 5th grade that our little clique, and there's always a clique, said, they're just not observing.
Yes.
The kids, we observed the manufacturer of the map that we pulled down to see the world, literally.
Yeah.
And then would do skits about what it would be like to work for the manufacturer which has no relevance today, except that we were alert. We were looking constantly, triggered constantly. And do you think we're sort of divided up that way as a people?
So I think that the problem of being alert is a human problem. We all face it. Clearly, some people pay more attention than others. Clearly, some people are more mindful, they're more observant than others. But we can all try and do better. And of course, one of the challenges as I get older and losing my hair, and you realize, well,
you'll get there.
Yeah. Just to confuse people, if you look at the portrait of me in the brochure, there are 2 photos of me, one with more hair than this and one with no hair at all. Just so I've gone for the middle.
You're practicing for the future. That's all.
So I'm not as young as I used to be. I have 3 children. I've lived in the same city now for 10 years. You observe less. You are less alert when everything is the same every day. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us as we get older, because of course, when you're 18 months old, everything's new. It's all new, and so babies are super, super, super alert. The older we get, the more we have to be conscious to observe. The more we have to try to provoke ourselves to get into different situations. I was just talking to my wife before I came to Rancho Mirage. A phone call from Heathrow Airport, and she said, it's such a shame you have to travel such a long way, and it's good of you to go. And I said, well, yeah, it's a long, long journey. I'm going to be tired, but it's new. I've never been to the desert. I've never been to South California. I've never seen the palm trees. I haven't seen the winter sun. I want to see something new. And I know that I will remember this week in 20 years. Now, is it because I'm a super alert person? No, it's because it's new. And the more we press ourselves to be in new situations, to talk to new people, the more that's going to happen. The challenge is, it's all comfortable to stay. It feels easier and feels more comfortable to stay in the same place, to visit the same places, to talk to the same people. I'm a very shy person. I don't like talking to new people. I find it hard, but I never regret it. Whenever I start a conversation, of course, I've had to meet lots and lots of new people in the last week, I never regret the conversation. And yet, last night, I was sitting outside quietly at a dinner by myself on a bench, looking out over the lake, thinking, I'm happy here by myself. I'm just happy by myself, no problem. And then, of course, someone came up and started talking to me. I thought, oh no, a conversation, oh no. And of course, 3 minutes in, I'm like, I'm an idiot. Why does this always happen? But it's that, we need to provoke ourselves. There's a wonderful little study of this I describe in the book, conducted by a psychologist called Catherine Phillips. Super simple. She got people to work on problems in small groups of 4 people. Try and work on this problem. It's a murder mystery problem. It doesn't matter. It's a problem. Some of the groups, this is a randomized trial, so some of the groups are 4 friends. They're all from the same college fraternity or college sorority. The other set are groups of 3 friends plus 1 total stranger. And the stranger is kind of introduced after 5 minutes. So in this group, you get a 4th friend arrive after 5 minutes. In this group, the stranger arrives after 5 minutes. The stranger doesn't have any extra information. The stranger is not a criminologist or a forensic scientist or a retired police officer, just another student, just somebody you don't know. And so they got people to solve these problems. So let's have a think. Well, how successful are these groups at solving the problems? So it's multiple choice, A, B, C. If you are on this problem by yourself, your chance of solving it is slightly under 50%. If you are a monkey throwing darts, your chance of solving it is 33%. So, people are not that much better than monkeys. What about the groups of 4 friends? Well, their success rate goes from just under 40% to just over 40%. It's not a big, so just under 50 to just over 50. Not a big improvement. The groups with the stranger, their success rate is 75%. So just having the stranger with no extra information, no extra insight about this slightly weird problem, you are as far ahead of the groups of friends as the groups of friends are ahead of the monkey. This is a big improvement in performance. But what really interests me about this is that afterwards, Catherine Phillips interviewed people and said, well, how did you feel about this experiment? The groups of the friends said, we had a great time, we had a really good, insightful conversation, and we are sure we got the right answer. The groups with the strangers were like, that was awkward, we didn't have a great time, it was difficult to integrate everyone, and we don't think we got the right answer. But their success rate was much higher. So this was just an illustration of how it's like Keith Jarrett had to be guilt-tripped into playing that piano. He did not think, what a wonderful opportunity. This is going to be such a creative evening. He said, I don't want to play. Of course he did. Same thing with the strangers. I don't want the stranger in my group. I don't enjoy having the stranger in my group, and when it's all finished, I don't think the stranger helped, but the stranger did. So we constantly have to challenge ourselves to go to the new places, to talk to the new people, to encounter the dangerous ideas. That's what makes us alert. Brian Eno, the great composer and producer who I spoke to while working on the book, he was the one who was emphasizing alertness. And he said, oh, it's like you trip over and you fall, or you're crossing the road and suddenly there's a truck coming towards you. Suddenly you really feel alive. You're really noticing what's going on. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun. It's not fun. But yeah, we often feel uncomfortable at the very moment when we are really paying attention.
Now, let's just try to make Tim uncomfortable. Would you like some Q&A?
I'm very, very happy if anyone has any questions to ask.
Comments?
Have we got microphones for people, or are we just going to shout? David, you take whichever questions you want.
There's a gentleman there. Yes, sir.
Prioritization of tasks, for instance.
Or projects.
So I think about this sort of thing a lot. The Financial Times, as well as being an economist, they think that I'm a productivity guru. I think it's just because I'm just finishing my 8th and 9th book. I think that may be the reason. So I do think a lot about this. The thing is that priority changes all the time, depending on what's your car just broke down, your spouse just called, there's somebody got ill, you got ill, your boss called, your boss has got a different priority from you. The priorities are always changing. So my basic piece of advice is to keep it simple. I try to keep track of absolutely everything that I've got to do, but I try to keep track in a very straightforward way. There's just a list that I can go through, and then each day I just write down, this is the thing I want to do today. Assuming I do that, here's the second thing I want to do today, and here's a whole list of stuff in tiny, tiny writing in the corner that it'd be nice to tick off. But physically on the paper, the priority for the day takes up twice as much space as the list of every other thing that I have to do. That's really flexible because then as ideas come about the thing I'm supposed to do, I can write them on the piece of paper. But you can change you just sort of turn things around, rewrite the piece of paper, something new comes in. I think it's important to be able to focus on what matters to you, but what matters to you at 9 a.m. might not be what matters to you at 9:05 a.m. So thanks for the question.
Another in yellow right here.
Do I think messy houses are better than clean ones? Okay, so number one, I would never tell anybody else how to organize their house. I don't tell my children how to organize their room. There's an experiment that I describe, there's an experiment I describe in the book, which really changed my thinking about this, where psychologists were basically examining a clean desk policy and getting people to do work in different office environments. And what they found is it does not matter what the office environment is. What matters is, do you have control over it? So the people who were told, oh, you can arrange the posters how you like, you can have a pot plant, whatever, they're only doing a couple of hours work here. You arrange things however you like, they were the ones who were most productive. Actually, how the office was did not make any difference. When the psychologists, as part of the experiment, they would say, oh, arrange it however you like, and then just before the person started working, they said, oh, sorry, this doesn't work for the experiment, and they'd rearrange everything. That drove people completely insane. People were physically sick. They wanted to punch the experimenter. They hated the office. They hated the work. They hated the company and the experimenter. And it was all about that loss of control, even though there was nothing objectively wrong with the surroundings. So number one, don't try and tidy somebody else's stuff up. Tidy your own stuff up if you like. But the second point is, I'm quite a tidy person. If you came to my house, you would say, this guy's a hypocrite. What is he doing writing a book about mess? But it's about choosing the right level of organization for the problem that you've got. So my kitchen is tidy because everything in the kitchen has a place. And so if I cook, or my wife cooks, or sometimes my children cook, then afterwards you can tidy everything up. Everything goes in its place. Same thing for the bedroom. Everything in the bedroom's got a place. My clothes have got a place. Tidy it all up. My desk, things don't have a place because new stuff is constantly coming across the desk. New letters, emails, projects, books, tasks. The Marie Kondo advice, and I'm a big fan of Marie Kondo, by the way, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying. It's great, absolutely great. It's not a book about tidying. Not a book about tidying. It's a book about having less stuff. Because if you've got less stuff, the whole problem becomes simpler. She says in the book, there's no point in having a clever tidying system. There's no point in having an organizational system. It doesn't solve any of your problems. She's completely right. So we're in agreement. But you think about the one core piece of advice Marie Kondo gives, which is to take everything into your hand and to ask yourself, does this spark joy? It's kind of become a bit of a cliche now. Okay? That's good advice. Unless you're talking about an email, a letter, a book that someone sent you. She doesn't understand books. She clearly doesn't understand books at all. It doesn't work. It works for your lingerie drawer. It works for your kitchen utensils. Works for for pieces of art and children's knickknacks and all of that. It works. For an email, it does not make sense to say, does this email spark joy? I'm going to keep this forever or get rid of it forever. So, that's a category error. So what I'm talking about is the process of actually doing stuff, creating stuff, whether you work as a writer or as an accountant or as a dancer or as a pianist or whatever you do, the stuff comes up and you have to process it and deal with it and try and make something of it. And that process of making stuff is probably a messy process. If it isn't, if it's super tidy, fine, no problem, great. But I think for most people, it's actually very messy. And I think one of our problems is we look at how a surgeon would organize her operating theater, or how a precision engineer would organize the production line for a Toyota car. And we say, oh, My office, where I work in insurance, should look like that. And we're just making a mistake because they're different kinds of problem.
Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm signing books outside. Come along.